I'm Margaret in Windsor, and usually I put up files and photos and information to support what I'm saying. I've got so many of it up on YouTube and Facebook that it's easy if you're interested to find. I have two YouTube accounts because somebody stole my phone a couple of Easters ago now that I thought was a friend, and I still don't have it back online yet. But anyway, what I wanted to put up today was this friend of mine first gave me a phone, so I could video and tell what's happened to me because I can't get an attorney. It's so high profile, nobody will touch it. So I put it up on Facebook and YouTube, and I would not have known about my kidnapping had the Brits not told me, and Germans, and then some Americans. And let me go back to this, is what I wanted to say today. I was reading an article. I get the news feed over my phone, Google, and it had about the Rothschilds and the opulence that they're living and controlling all the banks and the beautiful homes that even the monarchs don't live in. I was kidnapped in 1941 at age 2 from Buckingham Palace. I did live there for a while before I was kidnapped. So George, the illegal George VI, and his family had moved in there in 1937 when Wallace Simpson married an imposter, not my father. And my father moved out for a while till I was born, and my mom, and moved back in. So I was kidnapped from Buckingham Palace. So Elizabeth, my uncle, illegal George VI, was part of my kidnapping and taking down of my father, and especially his wife that was known as the Queen Mum, Elizabeth and Margaret's mother. By the way, my name's also Margaret too, is Victoria II. The name that I have to use is Peggy Ann Dempsey Childers. I was kidnapped and brought over in 41, dumped in a shack in poverty and abuse that's unbelievable. But I wanted to get to this today. I was given the name of a twin, Peggy Ann Dempsey, and married to Childers. And both twins, I found out in 83 when I was in a political campaign, were murdered by Lina Dempsey, their unwed mother, and the family covered it up. And when I wrote the book, they really tried to kill me because they were afraid if the book was published that the world would know and link it back to her killing her twins and who I really am, and she would face the gas chamber in Alabama. Back then she would have anyway. So I'm going to go to this part. I've shown pictures where my Uncle George was with the sixth, illegal, was with Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, 1939, the year I was born. I was kidnapped in 41. Roosevelt appointed Joe Kennedy, JFK's father, as U.S. ambassador, 36, listen to the dates, to 46, and they kicked him out. JFK flew in there. He was in the Army. He helped in my kidnapping. Okay, so let me get back to when I was kidnapped from Buckingham Palace at age 2. After I found out about my kidnapping, I could remember a lot. And I was 2 years old and a little younger than I remember. So I'm quite sure Elizabeth being 15 when I was kidnapped, and she lived in Buckingham Palace too. So you had the two families there that the uncle is trying to keep a title that's not his and give to his daughter. And this is one thing I want to say about the so-called Queen Mom, Elizabeth Bowes Lyon. She was closely related to the Rothschilds. They stole my father's inheritance, if you want to call it that, his title, his right to represent his country, my country. My mom was Claudia Ruth O'Keefe from Wisconsin, Madison, Grand Prairie, sister to artist Georgia O'Keefe, the artist. Now, I have to use Georgia's name to get people to know who my mom is. It was a plot to take my father down by the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Bilderbergers, the Kennedy clan, JFK. The Warren Commission would have led back to me, therefore the cover-up. And Robert Kennedy, the Justice Department is named after Robert Kennedy. This family Well, anyway, they helped take down, and it made them wealthy, and JFK became president. It's unbelievable that people know about my kidnapping and what's been done to Great Britain, and they call these people courageous. They're a bunch of thieves, and so is Elizabeth, because she certainly knows, the whole family does. They're part of the Freemasons and the Rockefellers, the Illuminati now, and have been for a while. The global government. Now then, back to, I was living at Moonraker Apartments in 1977, 78, and I did a book called MD, A License to Kill. And it was about mind control murders. I had worked for doctors and found out how they could put chips in heart bypasses, and did. And remote control people. And I found out way back then that you could use the ham set and teach people the Morse code at a signal that they aren't aware they're getting. And you can program them to shoot, to kill, commit suicide, or appear to, just like the Virginia Tech shootings, the Aurora, Colorado. I could go on and list a bunch of them. Some of these, without a doubt, you can prove. They can be proven. But getting it before a court of law, I can't even get counsel for myself. So if the newspapers won't print it, they're controlled by the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and the media that I'm talking about that kidnapped me. And my own family have stood by and helped do this to me, except the German family didn't, I don't think at all, and the Romanovs, because they were killed by Woodrow Wilson from Stanton up here, and she ended up being murdered by the mental health system, Blue Ridge, in Charlottesville, Virginia. And she was married to a professor there that did everything he could to help her. It was all illegal in May of 1984. So back to Moonraker Apartment, which the book was entitled MD, A License to Kill. A License to Kill came out a few years later with Timothy Dalton, and just prior to that, Roger Moore and Moonraker came out. And so they're 007s, and this is what's been used in this. You can link it together. It's murders and it's things done in patterns. Larry Flint of Hustler magazine was shot in Lawrenceville, Georgia, while I was doing the book, March the 6th of 78. Lawrence County, Alabama is where I was taken, Moulton. Montgomery, Alabama is the state capital there. And later in 83, in a political campaign, I was flown out to Mr. Flint's and twice, and he helped me in the campaign, because one of the doctors I wrote about, Congressman Larry or Lawrence McDonald, his plane that he was on passenger was shot down, the KAL, and it was en route from Juneau, Alaska to Seoul, South Korea. Mind control can be used to make the pilot, he doesn't know he's getting programming or mind control, can make him veer off course, which is what he did, or fly into a mountain and explode or whatever, or into the ocean. Now, this is what the government's into. So they were into it when I was finishing high school in Huntsville, Alabama. That's NASA, where they took me to Moulton, Decatur, Huntsville. They're a few miles from each other. I worked in electronics, and I didn't know anything about mind control or anything, my God, or my real name or anything. So, but I did know about ham sets and the electronics. And so I want to go to when I moved from Moonraker. The Larry McDonald, of course, I'd written about him in the book. He was one of the cases. And his name is Larry, or Lawrence, as in Lawrence County, but you get into where you can link it. So I moved from Moonraker into just up the street to Laurelwood Apartments, and Lina Dempsey, the mother of the twins that had killed them, she was in Governor George Wallace, who ran for president in that campaign. And by the way, George Wallace I like. He's an honest man, a good man he was. And I'm so sad that happened to him. She was in the campaign. He was not for her, but he was shot by a programmed shooter. also, just like they shot Flint. But you can make people appear to commit suicide. It's the Tesla files that were stolen by the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Bilderbergers back in early 30s, that you could cure an illness or you can create one. And I was recently in the emergency room, and I used to, when I worked for the hospital and doctors, I did payroll and payables and inventory. And you can walk into the emergency room. You don't have to go in the other parts of the hospital and see all that goes into a hospital. So it really creates your economy, really. So they don't want any of it to be told. Stop and ask yourself why no one with all the money that's given and the funds have found a cure for things. Well, the New World Order's in place now. I think everybody pretty well knows that. And I wasn't a biblical person, but I do know who kidnapped me. I know what's gone on since '83, and I found out about my real name. So they're in power. Now I want to go back to moving to Laurelwood Apartments. Laurelwood was like Laurel, Maryland, where George Wallace was shot, and Lina Dempsey, the mother of the twins, was there with him. And he had nothing to do with her, really. But she was working in the campaign. Now, when I moved there, a lot of things happened to me and my sons, Mark and Scott, who I don't know where they are now. I can't find out anything, but horrible things were done to me and my children, their heirs after me. I was Victoria II the day I was born. My husband, Rex's husband, we were separated. He moved back in with us. And I took him up to the office of the manager, and I said, he's come back because a lot of things are happening. I did the book, and it was my deposit, my everything. And he was going to be there a few days, a month or so. Well, I'm not going to go into what happened about that, but I got a letter from the FBI, June the 23rd of '79, and it said ongoing investigation, national security involved. And Attorney William Harper was the one that sent it to me, and sent to him by the FBI in Atlanta. And they were, as far as I know, decent, the FBI there. So the one thing that happened, and I'm skipping and going to stop here. This was something I wanted to put up and add to all this. The woman at the manager, she said, well, I know what you're talking about. I didn't know about my kidnapping until '83 and my real name. My father's Edward VIII, and he was married to my mom, Claudia Ruth O'Keefe, and he abdicated in '36 while he was married to my mom and remained married to my mom till they died after 1986. I hope I'm not being redundant or confusing it. You don't even hear my mother's name. She was Queen. My father was forced, not because he was going to marry Wallace Simpson like they said in '37. She married an imposter. It was a plot to take him down because he wouldn't take orders from the Rothschilds and Rockefellers on what to do to our country, Great Britain. And you see what George VI and Elizabeth have done. Anyway, I want to get back to Laurelwood Apartments. The manager said when I got the letter, or she might have said this before, and I wondered why she brought it up. She said, well, I guess because of the letter from the FBI, she said my uncle was in charge of the Patty Hearst kidnapping. And later, when I started finding out about my name and everything, Hearst lived in the castle, and supposedly Patty was kidnapped and she was programmed. But anyway, the Hearst, I found out later, I don't know who all got in on my kidnapping. The Kennedys, Rothschilds, Rockefellers, my uncle, part of my own family, George VI, etc. And Roosevelt, I want to say that Roosevelt. So the whole family. So I'm going to go because for the moment I wanted to put that up though, because I got the letter. It was on my father's birthday, June the 23rd. June the 23rd of '79. Of course, that was the year I got the letter from the FBI. And I had to move. Well, I didn't move, excuse me. I was going out to my husband's, or ex husband, whatever. I don't know, the whole mess got so convoluted. To his sisters in Abilene, Texas, who told me I could come and stay a couple of weeks and she'd try to help me find a job. If I found a job, I was going to move out to Abilene to take my sons because so much was happening. Well, I got to Fort Worth and or Dallas and called her, and I'm kept penniless. And she told me it was a total different tune. Suddenly, after I'm out there and a few miles away from her, hours, she says I'm no longer welcome. So I go back to Atlanta. Marriott, I find out that my ex-husband has been allowed to move into the apartment, another apartment within the same complex at Laurelwood, and they allowed him to take my deposit, put it in his name, and I had no key. And later, April Fool Day of '80, I had antifreeze put in me. You got the doctors, so many doctors, I can name them, some of them involved, and the people involved in trying to kill me, and it just about did. It was a hell in itself. I was illegally transported across the state line to Huntsville in that shape by Lina Dempsey, that the mother of the twins, and the one that they told me growing up was my mother. There's no word for her. She was a psychopath and diagnosed as one. So somehow I made it through it. I don't think my sons ever knew what really happened. I didn't see them but a couple of times, and I wasn't allowed back to my own apartment, but I did go to work for the district attorney, Fred Simpson, as in Wallace Simpson. I lived at the Warren House Apartments, as in the cover-up. Warren Commission covered up JFK's assassination. They assassinated my father by kidnapping me, and also character assassination, the lies that were told. But anyway, the next job I had, it was kind of like telling people later I found out my real name and what had happened. By the way, John Lennon was shot in November while I worked at the DA's office, and he was shot by Mark David Chapman. So the Mark David is my father's name, Edward VIII is his title, and Chapman, the last letter C. He was programmed, and after I moved to Roanoke, in the paper here, somebody went back, the paper did, and found out that Mark David Chapman had lived here in Roanoke on 9th Street, and so there's some other connections to up here in Roanoke, like Elvis Presley 2 weeks before he died was coming up here. Anyway, so I don't get, lose you here. I worked for the district attorney, passed a background check in the condition I was in by Sheriff Patterson, and it's unbelievable. My whole life, it's the FBI during that time, just before the antifreeze, said they were stacking them, and they meant the crimes committed against me. So Elizabeth is living great, and people love her, and I have maybe 2 or 3, if you want to call them outfits, and people hate my guts. You know why? Because I told about the mind control murders, and if they could do all that back then, just think of what they can do now, technology. They can program armies.